Okay, Sharon.
Awesome. Thank you, Diana, for that introduction. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining our virtual session today. I'm very excited to see you all here. I'm going to give a quick introduction on our Denver chapter for those of you who haven't joined or you don't know about the Denver chapter. And then I'm going to hand it over for a little introduction on our organizers and hand over to Al after that. So we are a virtual organization based in Denver, Colorado, where we help you in your RPA and any automation journey that involves RPA or AI. So our team includes myself. I'm a senior machine learning consultant at Ashling Partners. We have Rashmi Parikh, a RPA developer at Dish Wireless, and we have Sai Kandibanda, who's an RPA manager at Dish Wireless. So I'll hand it off first to Diana, who's our America's community manager, to give a quick introduction about yourself. After that, we'll go over to Rashmi, myself, and then Al.
Thank you. So again, I'm Diana Gray. I'm the community marketing manager for the Americas with UiPath. And I'm responsible for the US, Canada, and Latin America. And so we have a group of MVPs, of which we have 2 on the call today who volunteer and are selected every year to present and help us out with sponsoring UiPath community activities. And then we also have 23 chapters in the Americas. Denver is one of them. So we're happy to have you all here today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Diana. Rashmi, you want to go ahead and give a quick introduction about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Sharon. Hi, team. My name is Rashmi, and I'm in this RP industry list from 5 years, and I'm the part of the Denver chapter. And thanks, Sharon and Diana, for including me and having me here. And I just joined today, and thanks to Elle for this the session. So I'm just gonna learn it. So that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Rashmi. So today we are going to talk about generative AI and its best practices. And we have one of a subject matter expert in the industry, a full-time UiPath MVP, Al, who's joining us today. Al, thank you so much for your time, for agreeing to join us. I'm very excited to see this session because this is something that's everyone's excited about. I think generative AI, open AI is something that's in demand in the industry. Many of our vendors, our clients, they want to know how to implement. So I'll hand it over to you, and thank you once again for being a key speaker in this session.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I'm happy to be here. Let me share my screen and give me a thumbs up if you're able to see it.
Yes, we can see it.
See it? Great. Yes, so as Sharon mentioned, I'm going to talk about how to leverage generative AI and some topics around how it's used, what its short and long-term impacts, along with how to adopt it in an enterprise, and some of the good impacts and bad impacts. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to be a good prompt engineer alongside of how to better understand how the AGIs work so that you'd be able to interact with them the way you wish to. So I'm a senior solutions engineer at Ashling, like Sharon, and then I've been part of the UiPath MVP community for 4 years now. I also run my podcast called Masters of Automation. If you like to listen to some of the industry leaders talk about the industry, you'll be able to go there, so process mining to AI and whatnot. So to kick things off, I think generative AI has been spoken a lot about, and everyone has a perspective, but a lot of the people see it as a shiny tool. So when the web came out, what happened was that everyone wanted to build an application on the web to make things easier for the people. So for generative AI, there are two ways it can accomplish that. One of them is that it can produce content, and the second, it can analyze content. And we'll get into how that will work. In adoption of an AI, there are different segments to it, right? So AI can augment into the work that you're already doing today. So like existing markets, existing customers. It can go into adjacent verticals in the company, the things that you could be doing and AI enables you to do it. Or it can completely transform your business and make you move to a large market opportunity. So obviously there are different ways here, right? Like if it augments into what you do today, it needs to significantly improve your employee experience and customer experience while giving you productivity gains. If it's adjacent markets, it needs to allow you to build products that you can take it to your customers. And if transformational, again, it will really completely change your core business model. So some companies are really impacted by it, right? So like you will see a lot of analytics companies who have many dashboards or like widgets on the screens now could be the getting risk to be completely replaced by just a conversational AI, because who would want to see a trend line analysis versus just add the trends to AI and it will tell you. So these type of impacts we will see a lot in both the product companies and the services companies. From product companies side, really now everyone is trying to adopt it for the very reason I just told you. Either they need to transform their business or be obsolete, or they need to find ways that really significantly change and improve their customer experience. It's an interesting paradigm to think about if you want to win with AI or lose against it, because your competitors are doing it, even if you're not. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Synth AI. So there are two waves to generative AI right now, and this analysis is done by Anderson Horowitz, which in San Francisco is one of the largest venture capital firms. So they are saying essentially on the left-hand side, there will be a lot of natural language generated prompt and response. So that will mean there will be a lot of content, from blog posts, from text to images, right? You can currently see that with Midjourney and Dolly. There will be foundational data sets that you can also create with AI for testing. You can create code and whatnot. Where the second right-hand side way will be synthesizing the information, right? So like if the AI created the data, do we ask AI to summarize it again for us? Or do we ask it to summarize for the human-generated content? But essentially the world we're entering in right now, we won't know who is generated what, and how do we distill that information and make it presentable again. So I'm sure you see a lot of examples of blog posts that can increase your SEO capabilities. So if AI can do it, that means everyone can do it. And that also means that the web will now be suffocating with a lot of blog posts that really know how to improve their SEO, which will then really break the system. But in that way, then how do we synthesize that information? How do we start to summarize it? As the content goes higher, we need to find a way to make it lower, which is also another impact that we will see at generative AI. So you will see a lot of the applications from the standpoint of your businesses, or you're trying to augment within the AI. It's really important to think about before putting it externally, what would be the outcome of that content? Will people at the end of the day just want to summarize it versus read it more? So there's an importance to scenario planning, and it's been done in different businesses a lot, to be able to anticipate the good outcomes, the not so good outcomes, and worst outcomes. So obviously everything has a likelihood, and we will approach it as a scenario planner. to make sure that everything is well covered, so you won't be shot back with a surprise. So your enterprise are now currently impacted by this technology, and then you're probably either you're a developer or you're part of the business side, doesn't matter, but you're looking for ways to use it, whether it's for productivity gains or it is just to help you write code. But it's important also to think about for different those personas, how does it impact us? So I will start with the good ones first. According to the current analysis that Microsoft reported on Copilot, they saw that their developers see 60% productivity increase compared to those developers who did not leverage generative AI. So that means that if you have coding capability at your fingertips, it is true, it does accelerate you, and it does help you write code faster and probably allow you more time capacity to other things or write more code. So it's really powerful. There's the aspect of augmentation and task execution. So most of the current design systems for generative AI are human in the loop. And the reason why is that the outputs are not so good just yet. It really requires you to review it or change the tone a little bit so that it feels like you wrote it. If you're writing an email or if you're writing any text content, you want it to sound like you or sound like the persona that you want to sound like. So we are still currently at the stage of human in the loop, which is a good case because it allows you to read it and monitor what is going on. But let's talk about not so good cases right now. Let's think about you accelerate it, right? Like you start to use it every day. And then for your emails, you're using the generative AI to communicate. For your customer outreach, you use generative AI. For your coding, you use generative AI. So you are really on productivity on steroids. So at that point, how would the world look like? Because if you adopt it, that means other people adopt it too. And that means whoever didn't adopt it will have to be, you lose their jobs, right? Because they're no longer in competitive advantage anymore. So at that point, how do we train in generative AI? And how can you understand to use it for your advantage? There will be a little bit of the digital misuses of it, right? Like you will probably hear and see it currently. Like there's a little bit of the bad content generation, or sometimes there are some hallucinations that happen. And currently the human in the loop portion of it really allows you to kind of fix those. But if you see that human in the loop is out of the equation, then it can really scale. The other part is the cyber attacks, right? If conversational AI is the center of dominance for your knowledge, then if it is penetrated, then every conversation that you have will be out there. So these are the not so good ones. The worst scenarios come in with data privacy. So currently, unless you store it in the like Azure DevOps type of cloud and have your own database, and it doesn't go to the general AGI database like the way ChatGPT has right now, it can really be problematic, right? Because you've shared the company data, what is the IP log, what is the content log, all the conversations go there, who monitors it, what happens if there's a leak, and so forth. The other aspect to it is that as AI gets better to generate images, which means faces and whatnot, it gets better to generate music alongside voice. And I'm sure you guys seen the rap battle between 50 Cent and Weeknd. And then there's the text generation. So at that point, since technology is the intermediary between people, how do you know who you speak to? And how do you know who you communicate to? Because everyone adopts a new persona, and AI will enable them to write differently and to communicate differently. It's an important thing to think about as we are entering into building applications and they are long in term impacts of applications. And if you've seen the recent Sam Altman statement in the Congress yesterday, he was basically saying we need to regulate this. It doesn't end up like social media. So again, for RPA, for automation, for enterprise adoption, generative AI will be the most impactful. So it won't be applications that are helping you to write a song or poem. They will face a lot of scrutiny. However, an enterprise adopts it, increase their productivity 100%, and start to roll applications that are really changing the way people communicate, then it's going to be a really different world that we live in. So just to make you ponder a little bit about, it is a shiny thing, it's a very powerful thing, but we have to think ahead about the short and long-term impacts of this technology. So there's some guiding principles in adoption, and some of these points, as is mentioned in Bain and Company's new generative AI release as well. So if you're an enterprise, I would say focus on realistic application that complement existing business capacities. So that will mean that it needs to be easy to implement, not really risky. Risk in the form of it's not going to completely revolutionize, completely change your core business model, but it's not also going to allow your customers to rethink if your app is good and does not cause fear within the organization. So the basic one and the most widely talked about one is knowledge management. So if you fine tune an LLM based on your own data and feed that data into your LLM and enable a conversational AI interface, then it will be a really powerful search engine to query any data you want. And it's not that hard to set it up, but a lot of companies are trying to look for ways to set it up. The other piece is the perfectionism. I think in one of the aspects of generative AI is that it's progressing very fast. So from when the GPT-3 came out to the public through the ChatGPT interface, it was November and December timeline. And we're already in May, and then we have GPT-4, Bard came out, there's AutoGPT, and then the industry is going really fast. So the progress is happening really fast. So don't try to aim for perfection, right? That will trap you in a proof of concept that doesn't really deliver value. So it's going to keep iterating. If you roll out on the minimum viable product out there, you'll be able to keep iterate based on customer and employee feedback quickly. So that's another rule of thumb. The third part is that make sure that you don't take big risks when it comes to intellectual property security, customer data security, as well as the brand credibility and legal protections. Because as it's impacting the business by interfacing with your customers, it's really going to change the way people view your product, right? Some companies really advocate the fact that they have great customer experience because they have people communicating with it. So AI's addition in there will change the communication lines a little bit. It's going to be for the good, but again, it depends on the perception. So make sure that what you're doing is not going too fast and break things, unlike what Mark Zuckerberg says, but more on the side of how can I make sure I'm not risking my customers' data. So you're not feeding all the customer data on the ChatGPT or your sensible healthcare information to an LLM. So I'd like to a little bit talk about now prompt engineering. I know you probably heard about this a lot, but prompt engineering is really picking up, and actually the big companies that are building the LLMs are hiring for these type of roles. And this role's definition, like prompt engineer's role's definition, is not a developer role. It's more of an English language role. Or if the interface is French, then French, or another language, another language. So it's really a mixture between someone who's very technical, understands how AGIs work, and be able to communicate with them, because you'll be able to wield the English language to communicate it. As we know, there are many ways to say one thing. So the quality of the prompts really affects the output of the model. And this is something that I think everyone noticed at this point. Whatever this conversational AI or not, the prompt is going to be the most important part of your application. And any employee or any customer who's going to interface with the AI will have to learn how to communicate with it. And as companies, in a way that it is your job to figure out how to do that, right? How does the user experience going to work? So there are different ways or tricks to be able to be a great prompt engineer. So there's the zero-shot learning, where the AI is not fine-tuned and has never seen your data, but makes an inference based on an understanding. So it's like saying that where can I find the best orange farm in the United States? It will look at all the data that's available, and it will bring that to you. It's not trained on the farms in the United States, but if it's fine-tuned, then it's going to get better at giving you that. So we will talk about zero-shot learning, one-shot learning, and two-shot learning shortly. There's also this chain of thought reasoning. I think this is one of the most powerful ones, because it really allows you to start to communicate with AI to be able to then change what it is, what its output. So you can tell it to structure it step by step, write this in code. Can you provide me some information in the structure of summary, analysis, insight, and bullets? So like you can define really the output and ask it to create it your way, rather than letting it loose and just create whatever that it finds. And then there are really important aspects around the personas. So you can create its persona, and by looking at the data set, it will try to communicate with you in that way. So you can tell it, I want you to be Shakespeare and write me a poem. Or you can say, I want you to be Bill Gates, and you're building Microsoft operating system from scratch. How would you code it, right? So it's quite interesting, the impact that it can have. And obviously, the fine-tuning part becomes really important when the data is proprietary, right? So Microsoft knows their code, so they can feed it with this. In your customers or in your companies, if you have niche IP like that, that's going to be gold in the future, because LLMs, no matter how general AI they are, they won't have access to your niche data to be able to make really inferences that smart. And can also tell it a little bit of a process. So you can say, do this and then do that. And then you can define some causality between them. So imagine a process flow where an invoice comes in, and the invoice is classified, validated, and analyzed. So you can actually draw that process line with ChatGPT with a multi-modal interface. So GPT-4 is going to support the multi-modals where you'll be able to deploy a picture, for example. So think about deploying a process graph and then telling it step 1 and step 2, we are doing the extraction and classification. And within the step 3, I want you to extract based on the percentage levels. So it's in a way, it allows you to build automation without actually using a canvas that is drag and drop. So that's going to be one of the interesting aspects of it as well, and we will touch on that a little deeper. So I mentioned about zero-shot learning and a few-shot learning. So zero-shot learning comes in when the model is asked to classify data, and it has never seen the data during the training. So in that case, that if it is not part of the training data, it's going to really get abstract and try to figure out an answer based on the highest percentage and probability of chance that what you're saying is near to what it is trained in. So typically they work well for large topics, but as the topics get really niche and specific, your IP data becomes really the game changer here. The other piece is the few-shot learning. So it's able to generalize content from a small sample of examples. So there's the one-shot or two-shot learning. So since the models are trained on large amounts of data, then there's really a lot of opportunity for the AI to make mistakes or misunderstand some things because the pool is too large. So few-shot learning refers to how humans actually learn information, right? So you'll be able to then, let's say we're talking about invoice processing, and I tell you about the invoice processing and how it works. You can take that information and apply it to different verticals and how it may work in different verticals, because you understand the concept of document processing, and then start to think a little bit more about the flexibility and adaptation of its reusable composability portion of it. So few-shot learning is the same way. Instead of teaching it with a large training data on many things, you train it based on small sample of data with small examples, and then ask it to the inferences onto the adjacent industries. So this is really powerful, and ChatGPT uses both of them. But few-shot learning is really improving the model's performance. If you are looking to build an LLM yourself, which you'll be able to do it today with one of the open source platforms on Hugging Face, this is definitely something that I would encourage everyone to think about. So we already talked about this, but I just want to touch it really quickly before I dive into some of the tips and tricks. But essentially, avoid using customer data in the beginning unless you really know what you're doing and there's no data leakage. This is really important, especially related to GDPR, HIPAA, and such. You can anonymize the data or use synthetic data if you're trying to work with a large number of data sets and then you want to make inferences on them. Just change the names and then figure out what the GDP or HIPAA laws around that data set, and then you can actually anonymize it and still use it. The hallucinations part is an interesting one because, as you know, humans have very variety of perspectives. So if there's capitalism, there's communism. If there's plus, there's minus. So even with generative AI, we see it, right? Let's ban it versus let's not ban it. So when AI is trained on a very large data set, it is general intelligence actually sometimes messes things up by not knowing what is the truth. And this is one of the biggest points mentioned by I'm sure you've seen in the news, the AI engineer who recently left Google, who built the gradient descent and backdrop propagation. So it's in a way that's the biggest piece, right? How does the AI become biased, and how can we stop that bias? And what are some of techniques to pre-processing or to make sure that it really answers the way we do, so like doesn't go outside of the context? So that's going to be a little bit of an art with prompting and fine-tuning it. The other part is the responsible use of it. I'm sure you've seen, yes, the generating voice is really cool, but I've seen some applications of it for really fraudulent cases. People can call using your voice, your parents, and ask for money, and no one will know anything about it. So there's really ethical usage of it. There are harmful usages of it, and as the industry grows, we will find out how generative AI will shape the impact of society. But as you're adopting this technology or integrating it in your RPA workflows or just everyday life, make sure to think of a little bit of these concepts, because it's not only about, again, making a shiny toolbox. It's more about a bigger picture, right? There's a bigger impact to this. So how to get the best out of AGIs? I like to start talking a little bit about reinforcement learning. because reinforcement learning is one of the, I think, the biggest ways that AI keeps getting better. And let's think about this scenario. So you collect some data and train a supervised policy, and you sample a prompt from your prompt data set. So and then your prompt is explain your reinforcement learning to a 6-year-old. A labeler demonstrates the desired output behavior. So if there's someone they will write the answer to this. And then this data is used to fine-tune GPT-3 with supervised learning. So in a way, with reinforcement learning, we actually give it the answer already. So it's not creating something from scratch, right? It's not like coming up with creativity. It is something, it's giving you an output that somebody already wrote about. The other piece is the comparison data and train a reward model. So after you say explain reinforcement learning to a 6-year-old, you can have multiple different answers to that. And after we feed those 4 answers, a labeler ranks the best output to the worst output. In this way, then we are essentially building a reward model, right? Which output is the best? And the AI over time keeps getting better as there are different variations of the answer to this question. There's also the mixture of the optimizing a policy against reward models. Again, using a PPO reinforcement learning algorithm. So if you ask it to write a story about others, the PPO model will initialize from the supervised policy, and then the policy generates the output. Like once upon a time, there was an author and whatnot. And then the reward model then calculates a reward for the output. So this is where things get a little bit complex. If you're really technically savvy, you may find this interesting, but if not, you may not. So over time, what's going to happen is that as we keep providing feedback on what is good and what is bad, the AI is going to get better. But from the other side of the coin, the very feedback that we are providing on what we think is good or bad is actually what is creating the bias in the data set. So with reinforcement learning, in a way, we're also creating the bias of the AI that's responding to. The other aspect of it is that as it keep getting better on learning certain topics, learning coding, learning other sections or topics and categories, then its productivity is going to increase. So as you're on ChatGPT and you are doing your communication, right, it's giving you an output, and the ChatGPT asks you, how well did we do it? Do you like it or not? And you say, yeah, it's good, but it could have been improved this way and that way. That goes to reinforcement learning. So in a way, it keeps getting better as time passes. So there's the format trick in the prompting. So you can actually paste a format. Imagine your PDD, STD, or imagine an NDA or a Word document. You can paste it and say, I want you to write in this format, and it will write it in that format. So format trick really helps, because if you really know the output you want to get and the structure you want to get, it will allow you less work to fill those blanks. It's a great accelerator. There's a specifying tasks using code prompts. So you can actually give a prompt and ask a question by writing code. So as you can see in this code, like we have a JSON format, like a dictionary output, we have a dictionary input, we have some output fields in the comments, and then we have more comments in the give the URL and text of the Wikipedia article. So it will be able to read your code and find the comments and where the prompt is. This is really powerful because as you integrate GitHub Copilot or any other tool to your coding standards, this is how AI works. It will start to scan your code and increase and accelerate your work. So let's say you're working 3 or 4 people on the same coding, or like there are some bugs and there's some section that you couldn't solve, like you couldn't figure out like the logic behind it. You can just add a comment, write the thing and then report the code right below it and be able to figure out an answer to it. There's a specifying task again using code prompts, but with imaginary variables. So you can create a variable called Beatles file paragraph, and then ask it to solve an equation or ask it to write a function using those variable names, so that you don't need to go back and keep changing, but it's much more integrated and comprehensive in one place. There's an external interpreter to this. So external interpreter, if you have an IPython session, or if you have Google Colabs, GitHub, if you have any other places, not only where you write the code, but where you are doing it, where you're generating and writing text in a different scope of work. It will still be able to help you with the answers and then generate you further code or guide you to a good direction. One of the interesting aspects of LLMs I've seen was actually with Khan Academy. So Khan Academy built a ChatGPT fine-tuned based on their own data set. So there's the teacher GPT and there's the student GPT. And I'm sure you've seen a lot about how ChatGPT impacts the schools and whatnot. So when it comes to the teacher GPT, it will tell the answer to the question that has been asked, but it will also guide the teacher with some principles around how to advise the student to find the answer. Whereas the student GPT would never reveal the answer to the student, no matter how many questions that they ask. And instead, it will guide them to finding the answer by helping to think a little bit deeper. So that comes with chain of thought prompting. So you can use chain of thought prompting on building a different thoughts based on the previous response. So what I provided you just now is an example application that Khan Academy built. There's another one in Duolingo. If you like to learn another language, Duolingo is really helpful. And they built a similar interface to help you practice different language. But if you don't understand certain aspects or can't figure out why certain things don't work, especially with vowels or different grammatical conjugations and whatnot, it can guide you through that process with that conversational interface. So similar to that, it can help you solve math. So what they found out is actually that with chain of thought prompting, you can keep building upon the previous answer that you received, but you can also do the chain of thought prompting in the back end. So it knows that the answer in the second question is 9, that when you have one child has 5 toys and then you have 2 toys from each of the mom, how many toys does he have now, right? But calculating it has been a big problem for ChatGPT. The ChatGPT is really not great at math, but now it's getting better at math because they're building the process of thinking. And the same thinking, you can apply it to anywhere, right? You can apply it to improve a blog post, which is a very simple example, but improve your solution architecture that you design with your state machine, with your iPad, for example. So there are many ways you can use a chain of thought prompting. There's a zero-shot chain of thought. So if it's not fine-tuned, it will just give you an example. But if it is fine-tuned a little bit with specific training data on your customer data and whatnot, then obviously that thought process gets better. So there's a difference between a professor thinking about how to solve an equation versus a student or a high school grad thinking about how to solve an equation. If you fine-tune it with the professor with a few shot learning, then it gets significantly more powerful. So you could think of it that way. When you get to zero-shot learning, you're just getting a very large way of thinking. And it just gets better, right? If you give your first prompt, and then you want it to then give a reasoning extraction. So you can ask it to, let's think about this step by step. So I want you to think about this step by step. And the AI, according to that, will start to form its response and also start to break the question into its fundamentals. So as you can see, it says on average, you'll throw 25 punches per minute. So this is the first thing. A fight lasts 5 rounds of 3 minutes. So these are two independent concepts, right? Two independent things. And what this allows you, if you tell it, okay, let's think step by step, then it's going to break the question into fundamentals. So the answer you receive is going to be significantly better than just asking it, can you solve this question for me? Because when you do that, then it's just going to read the text and try to relate a Joe throwing 25 punches. And maybe that is related to the 5 rounds of 3 minutes, right? There are different ways to think about this. And again, there's an art to it. And this is my final slide, but I want to talk a little bit about self-consistency. So how does AI actually improve itself? So I think we call it self-healing when there's a bug or not. So if you see the chain of code prompting side, the prompt comes in, goes to the language model. There's a greedy decode that decodes to calculate the question, answer to your question, and gives you a wrong answer. Whereas in a self-consistency, the AI is asking those step-by-step questions automatically. So what in that automatically, what happens, then you get the right answer. So those reasoning paths, right, saying that, oh, there are 9 eggs, how can I take 6 eggs? Or like if we go back to the, like, let's go to the document processing example, where you wanted to break it down more to classification extraction stages and then go deeper into different accuracies of the document field names and whatnot. It's the reasoning really becomes powerful if it is prompted the AI to think, but if it is already pre-coded into it, then the thinking will improve. So this is going to be what will power the applications that we will see in the 2 years, because ChatGPT currently is going with step 1. However, step 2, as more companies adopt and figure out their reason of thinking. This is a simple mathematical calculation, but imagine this is a financial analysis. Imagine this is doing the evaluation for a company. Imagine this is, and that's so powerful for an investor firm. Or imagine this is you doing calculations for your finances, right? So as each application adopts it in their own way, the self-reasoning, and your personal reasoning on to look at things, you can spin up an LLM of yourself as well at some point. It's going to be really powerful and will really change the game. So that said, I hope you find this session helpful. I know I talked a little bit of high level, and I didn't want to talk a lot about, generating the blog post, generate an SDD. Here are 5 cool things you can do with ChatGPT, or 5 prompts. I just want to explain a little bit more about the thinking and the reasoning behind some of those prompting techniques and the zero-shot, few-shot learning, how to fine-tune it, alongside of a bit of the ethical impacts of it. Because it is true, like, I think humanity messed up with social media. And when generative AI will come and dominate every single application around us, I think it's important to know the concepts of scenario planning, as well as its short and long-term benefits and cons. So that said, I will hand it back to you, Sharon, or Diana, to get some questions.
Thank you, Al, for a fantastic presentation on generative AI. Your thoughts and expertise were truly impressive and provided value on implementing generative AI, not only through UiPath solutions, but OpenAI, Bard as well. To our audience, I hope this discussion was thought-provoking. do let us know if you have any questions that you would want to ask Alp on the topics that we discussed today. You can ask through our chat, or you can unmute yourself and let us know the question. We've got one question on the recorded session. Yes, we do have a recorded session that will be uploaded right after our session is closed in our Denver chapter. So you can expect that within the course of this week to be live on our Denver chapter. Awesome. Thanks, Diana.
Yeah, I just put the link in the chat for everybody. Also, did you get this one question? Suggest some ways to improve accuracy.
No, I didn't see
Of
that. Thank you for
prompts.
pointing it out, Diana.
Yeah.
Alp, there's a question that says, suggest some ways to improve accuracy of prompts by
Yeah, so
Mohammed.
I think that's kind of the entire presentation, right? You have the prompt engineering section of it. Yeah, there are many ways, right? You can improve your prompting with chain of thought reasoning that we just talked about, and you can improve the reasoning with different calculations that it can do. So I think I covered it towards the end of the presentation.
Awesome. Any other questions? I'll give it a minute if anyone wants to think about it and ask a question to Alp, or else we can close the session for today.
While we're waiting, Alp, I just want to thank you for a great presentation to the team here today, and thank you all for joining.
Awesome. Alp, I think it's just those questions for now. But if you go through the video, oh, we got another question. Sorry. Well, Miguel, hi, Miguel. He asked, can you give us an example of how to train the model with our own data?
So the training is that interesting also in this context, it's going to be fine tuning. So your own data, you can do it in two ways. One of them would be knowledge management. So you would feed your data and let AI to query that data. So it's quite simple actually. So it's like loading a file. Typically the way it works is that you would have a text pre-processing function and then an embedding function. So the data set that LLMs interact with are actually vectorized databases. So if you're familiar with Pinecone, then I will check Pinecone to discover a little bit more of that. But in the vectorized data sets, really allow you to query that information more. So that's the first section of it. The other fine tuning is what I described earlier around reinforcement learning. So you have, let's say, industry that you operate in that, let's say, you providing healthcare devices. And so you'd be able to define what those healthcare devices mean in a JSON data set, and then feed that to the OpenAI or another LLM. So they do have a lot of documentation around how to fine tune. And there are actually some companies who allow you to host your fine tune and host your vectorized databases as well. So after you load that data and use a fine tune function on the GPT-4, then it's ready. So obviously I simplified a little bit, but I think the next steps would be to check in the fine tune functions for the respective LLM. And then how you structure your JSON file, which is your data set, your specific data set, to train the model.
Great. Thank you for that answer, Alp. We've got two more questions that have come up. I'll read it out to you. One of them is from Jalaj. Hi, Jalaj. His question is, which algorithm is most widely used for LLM models?
So maybe can you open the question a little bit? a little bit more detail around that. So do you mean in terms of just like neural networks and like how the neural networks work, or do you mean in terms of like algorithm when it comes as means of, you know, Google Bard's algorithm versus ChatGPT's algorithm?
Hi, good afternoon. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, my basic question was just basically, since LLM models are basically using, NLP, natural language processing, so maybe we can go in the direction where which algorithms are most widely used for NLP or most commonly used or best algorithm for NLP.
So it's really complex in a way. I'm not 100% sure like which specific algorithm that they used. But what I know and I can speak to is about they train based 65 billion parameters. So each parameter in the neural network is actually a topic, right? So
Yeah.
when you give your prompt, which is in the form of text, is typically tokenized. And what tokenization means, let's imagine the word sentence, you would get tenth as one and inst a second. So they have a massive data set, all tokenized, and you have your prompts input as also tokenized or pre-processed. So both of the data sets are in vector formats. So they're in vectors means they're in matrices and numbers. So in the most basic sense, then you do a query to the LLM. And obviously, this is more complex, right? There's gradient descent, there's the back propagation and whatnot.
Right.
But in the most basic answer to it is that it does a dot product. So what is the closest proximity of this vector to other vectors? And that's how it filters down. So within your matrices, you may have in document structure. So I think there are some examples on this on YouTube right now that I've seen recently was the Tesla's earnings statements. So you'd be able to create a vectorized database with 2020, 21, and 23 as the years, and then load that data in. And then your ask is, how is Tesla's his product strategy in impacting the price across 3 years? So what it's gonna do is gonna go to those 3 years buckets and then find proximity of what an impact means. So at that point it's unlocked to that 65 billion parameters, of course, but then it will go into figuring out the product section. So Tesla Model Y, Model X, it will go into their prices between all the 3 vectorized data sets, and then give you an inference by writing up content on calculating that. So again, it does on the back end a lot of chain of thought reasoning, but you can do it within the conversational AI as well. So you can ask it, can you get me the product strategy in 2021, and then 23, and then 23, and then 22, and then you can ask it, okay, what do you expect in 24 based on these? And I would like you to use a prediction based on linear, just say linear trend analysis. And then it will execute that analysis on those. So like in the back end, to access the knowledge, it will use a querying system, similar search engines does. But to do a more of a judgment, make the analysis predictions on things, it will then tap into all sorts of things that I think PhDs and computer scientists know about that I can't speak to.
Okay, so the data will be stored, so usually stored in a vector database then. That's the current trend. All right. Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Great question. Thank you for asking, Jalaj. Alp, do we have time for one more question? We have one more from Mahadev. Awesome.
Yeah, sure.
So he asks, can we train the model using UiPath Studio? If so, how do we achieve it?
You can call the fine-tuning function through the OpenAI API within UiPath and pass the data to via an API through UiPath. But UiPath at that point becomes just an API call function. So same way that you will do an API call in Python, you can do it in UiPath Studio. But yeah, you can do it.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for the answer.
Awesome. Thanks, Mahadev. Is there anyone else who has any open questions? You can unmute yourself or you can add it in chat. We've got 2 minutes to go. If you have any questions, just let us know. Okay, if not, we can close this session today. Alp, once again, this was very exciting. We learned, I hope everyone learned a lot about generative AI and how to implement it, an overview, a high-level view, just to get your curiosity going on generative AI and the implementations. So thank you very much, Alp, once again, for sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you to everyone who joined our call today. Like I said before, this session will be live on our Denver chapter page. So watch out for a notification once it wraps up, and you can view the video as well. So thank you all and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.